6 months ago, I jumped on a mountain bike for the first time. This video is 6 things I wish I'd known when I started. Cross-country bikes are now more than capable enough for most trails. So as a quick, rough rundown of mountain bike types, you have cross-country, which is pretty much one step up from gravel. It's the thing you might have seen Tom Pidcock and Van der Poel racing at the moment. Usually, the bikes have 100mm of travel. Sometimes they're hardtails, but this one has 100mm on the back as well, and they have an aggressive racing geometry. One step up from that is your trail bike. A little bit more travel, slightly slacker geometry. One level up from that is enduro, which are really beefed up. They have their own type of racing attributed to them as well. Even more travel, slacker geometry again. And then right at the end of the scale, you have downhill bikes, which are basically the bikes that Danny Hart will send off the edge of a cliff. Years ago, cross country was basically what we call gravel today. Bikes like this are a lot more capable now, and I found myself riding the red and black trails at like Hamsterley, Chopwell Woods, Peaslake, that kind of thing, without any issues at all. Granted, it may be more fun and you could take bigger jumps on a bigger bike, but because the technology has got so much better, a bike like this isn't going to be holding you back in the same way as it would in the 90s. Have a think about what kind of riding you'll be doing and what you want to get out of the bike. If you're going to be driving to the trails, riding a couple of hours up the gravel tracks and straight down the trails again, then maybe a beefier bike is for you. If you want to do a ride from home, that's a lot longer, talking like 4 hours, the kind of stuff that roadies and gravel riders might be more accustomed to, then a bike like this might be more suitable. Don't look at the stuff. This is the best piece of riding advice that I've had, courtesy of James Thomas. What does that actually mean? Of course you want to look at the trail ahead, assess what's coming up and make sure it's the right skill level for you, but when you've actually committed to riding the trail, things are coming up quickly, the last thing you want to do is look right in front of you at the stuff. Speaking as a roadie, if you're focusing too much on a pothole in front of you, you end up riding into it. That's called target fixation. It happens on a mountain bike as well. So as soon as you're on a trail and you're looking at the stuff that's right in front of you, that's pretty much unavoidable anyway, the more likely you are to ride into it. As soon as you start focusing on further down the trail or at the person in front of you, following their lines instead, ignore the inevitable obstacles and trust that the bike will just roll over it. That unlocked a whole new level of riding to me, and I was a lot more fluid. I reiterate, don't look at the stuff. Your bike is capable, you'll roll over it. If you go around a corner on your road bike and your tyres start slipping, you're probably f***ed. That's not the case though if you're riding a mountain bike. The knobbles on these tyres are so big that when you're going around a corner and you slip on a loose surface, whether it's mud or loads of gravel or sand, once you hit enough of an angle, those knobbles cut in and then suddenly you have grip again. It's actually a really weird feeling, and the first time I did it, I was riding through mud in the Isha Woods. It completely took me by a very pleasant surprise when I didn't fall off. When you're cornering on a mountain bike, I found that actually committing to it, leaning in more and getting those side knobbles to activate is the way to get around it as fast as possible. If you don't commit and your bike is too upright, you're not getting those to work, and in the end you end up scrubbing off more and more speed until you're going around really slowly. And that's not what you want. Admittedly, it does take time to give yourself confidence to do this though, so ease into it gently, find somewhere safe to practice with a nice runoff, and yeah, practice leaning that bike even on loose surfaces. Most mountain bikers run dropper seat posts, even on XC bikes now. It means you can ride really, really steep downhill stuff without being in a weird weight back position with loads of your weight off the front wheel, which can get a bit sketchy sometimes. They are a bit heavier than a standard seat post and quite expensive in some cases, but the amount of fun and speed that you'll have on the descents and confidence and all of that stuff will be worth it. Dropper seat posts are even making their way into gravel now, so there's loads of choice. This is the 27.2 seat collar, and it was quite hard finding one that fitted. This is a fairly uncommon size in mountain biking though, and now there are wireless ones that have just been released as well, so there's lots of competition. Hopefully the price will start coming down. Personally, I found riding with the dropper for the first time a bit of a weird feeling. Not having your saddle there to lean on and give a kind of false sense of attachment to the bike was a very strange sensation, but I did get used to it. What I did was start lowering it just a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more over time, and I found that was a good entry into it, because if you slam it the whole way down, suddenly you don't have a saddle anymore and it just feels really odd. Eventually when you get used to it, it means you can get in that really low squat position on the mountain bike. You don't want to be sitting down on the descents, and it means you're ready in that attack position to absorb any bumps, because the best suspension that you've got is in your arms and legs. Tire pressures can go really low. Like really low. I'm about 64, 65 kilos and I was running 15 PSI when I'm riding in the wet. And that's with 2.3 29er tires. Things will vary depending on your tire choice. The wider tire you go, the harder it's gonna feel at the same PSI. So as crazy low as 15 PSI sounds, it's not gonna feel the same amount of squishy as 15 PSI in a road tire. I do run slightly higher pressures if it's a dry day, but sometimes even then, halfway through a ride, I'll let a bit of air out just because it irons out all of those smaller bumps and you just get a better ride. I know there's some experienced mountain bikers who do watch this channel, so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on tire pressure in the comment section down below. What are you running in the wet and dry? And what tire size? Unlike road, I've discovered that mountain bikers almost exclusively use tubeless. It's been around for a lot longer than it has in the road scene, and the lower pressures help it work better too. So yeah, my message to my past self would be, don't be afraid to experiment with tire pressures, but maybe get an electronic gauge, because the gauge you get in track pumps isn't always the most accurate. Now, I spent too much time looking at online calculators and suspension setup. Now I know a lot of it is just personal preference. So there's two main adjustments you can make to your suspension: how much pressure is in it and the rebound speed. I won't go into the full ins and outs of how I set it up in this video, but here's my general thoughts. You don't want to be running too high pressure that you don't end up using the full range of travel. Think about what riding you're going to be doing. Are you going to be taking massive jumps to start off with? If you're going from road to mountain bike for the first time, probably not. So you probably don't need quite as much pressure in your suspension as someone who's going to be taking huge hits. The settings that you run are basically a compromise in between being sensitive enough for small bumps and absorbing those and smoothing them out, and having enough support when you take bigger hits on the bike. I think getting a feel for it over the first few rides you do, experimenting with different pressures and carrying a shock pump with you so you can adjust it on the fly is good advice. So that's a rundown of a few things that I've learned while riding mountain bikes over the last 6 months. If you started mountain biking recently, let us know your tips in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys soon.